The hospital room was silent except for the hum of machines monitoring his heartbeat. Charlie Kirk lay in the bed, staring at the ceiling tiles, counting them for the 100th time. It had been 3 days since the shooting, 3 days since his chest exploded with pain on that Utah stage, 3 days since he'd looked death in the eyes and somehow survived. But tonight, something felt different. The nurses had left for their rounds. His mother had gone to get coffee. The political aides who'd been cycling through all day with phones and statements and media strategies, they were finally gone. And for the first time since the ambulance, Charlie was completely alone. Not the performative alone of a backstage moment before a speech. Not the strategic alone of preparing talking points. True alone. The kind where you can't hide from yourself anymore. He closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to escape the fluorescent lights that had been burning into his skull for 72 hours. And in that darkness, a question rose up from somewhere deep inside, a question he'd been avoiding since the moment Tyler Robinson's finger pulled that trigger. What will happen to America? Not what will happen to Turning Point USA, not what will happen to his career, his platform, his legacy, but America, the country he'd spent a decade fighting for, speaking about, building a movement around. What will happen to it? The question hung in the darkness behind his eyelids, and then, impossibly, the darkness began to change. At first, Charlie thought the morphine was playing tricks on him. A warmth spread through the room, but it wasn't coming from the heating vent. It wasn't coming from anywhere physical at all. It was just there, growing, intensifying, not hot like fire, but alive like breath. His eyes opened, and standing at the foot of his hospital bed, backlit by a light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, was a figure Charlie recognized instantly. Not from paintings or stained glass windows, but from somewhere deeper, a knowing that went beyond sight. Jesus. Charlie's mouth went dry, his heart monitor beeped faster, but he couldn't speak, couldn't move, could only stare at eyes that seemed to see through his skin, through his bones, straight into the core of who he was. Not Charlie Kirk, the political commentator, not the founder of a movement, not the voice of young conservatives, just Charlie, the boy who'd grown up in Chicago suburbs, the kid who'd once believed in simple things before the world got complicated. Jesus looked at him with an expression Charlie couldn't quite name. It wasn't anger, it wasn't disappointment, it was something deeper than both. Sorrow mixed with hope, love mixed with truth. And then he spoke, not with a voice that came from his mouth, but with words that seemed to form inside Charlie's chest, resonating in his bones. America has a purpose. 4 words, but they hit like a physical force, and Charlie felt tears he hadn't known were coming spill down his cheeks. This nation, Jesus continued, his voice like thunder wrapped in silk, was not built just for power or wealth. It was raised to shine light. But if my people forget me, that light will go out. Charlie tried to respond, tried to say something, anything, but his throat closed around the words. All he could do was lie there, tears streaming, as the weight of those words pressed down on him. It's not about politics, Jesus said, and Charlie felt something crack inside his chest. It's not about parties, it's about faith. It's about remembering who truly sustains this land. The machines monitoring Charlie's vitals beeped more urgently, but he didn't hear them. All he heard was that voice, filling the room, filling his soul. I still have plans for America, Jesus said, stepping closer, but the people must return to me. Charlie's whole body shook. Every speech he'd ever given, every debate he'd ever won, every tweet that had gone viral, All of it suddenly felt small, insignificant, like building castles in sand while ignoring the ocean. Jesus moved to the side of the bed, and Charlie could see his face more clearly now. It was ordinary in the way that the sun is ordinary until you try to look directly at it. Human features, but radiating something that made Charlie want to both run and fall to his knees. "Charlie," Jesus said, and hearing his name in that voice broke something fundamental inside him. "You have been given a platform. Millions listen when you speak, but what have you been pointing them toward?" The question wasn't accusatory. It was gentle, but it cut deeper than any criticism Charlie had ever received. Charlie's voice cracked, barely a whisper. "I was trying to save the country." "Were you?" Jesus tilted his head. "Or were you building a kingdom of your own? Tell me, Charlie, when you stand before those crowds, when you send those messages, when you debate your opponents, are you pointing them to me or to yourself?" The words should have felt like an attack. Instead, they felt like surgery, painful but necessary, cutting away something infected that Charlie hadn't even known was there. "I thought—" Charlie's hands gripped the thin hospital blanket. "I thought if I could just wake people up, if I could just make them see the threats, the dangers, the enemies." "The enemies," Jesus repeated, and something in his tone made Charlie flinch. "You have spent years creating enemies, Charlie, drawing lines, building walls, us versus them, conservative versus liberal, righteous versus wicked. But tell me," he leaned closer, "where in my teachings did I tell you to make enemies of your neighbors?" "They're destroying everything," Charlie said, desperation creeping into his voice. "The radical left, the progressives, they're tearing down the values this country was built on. I had to fight them. I had to give people a weapon to—" "A weapon," Jesus interrupted, and for the first time there was something sharp in his voice. "You turned my message into a weapon. You took the gospel of love and transformed it into ammunition for culture wars. Do you understand what you've done?" Charlie felt like he was drowning. "I was defending you. I was defending faith, defending Christian values in a secular world." "Were you defending me?" Jesus asked. "Or were you defending a version of me that fit your political agenda? Tell me, Charlie, when did I become a mascot for your movement?" The question hit like a physical blow. Charlie's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Jesus sat down on the edge of the bed, his presence somehow both overwhelming and comforting. "America is not yours to save, Charlie. It is mine. It always has been. And it will not be saved by political victories or culture war triumphs. It will be saved the same way any nation is saved, by hearts turning to me." "But the country is falling apart," Charlie said, tears flowing freely now. "Families are broken, churches are empty, children are being taught to hate themselves, to hate their country, to hate—" "To hate," Jesus finished. "Yes, hatred has spread like wildfire. And Charlie—" He looked directly into Charlie's eyes. "You helped light that fire." "No." The word came out as a sob. "No, I was fighting hate. I was standing up to—" "You cannot fight hate with more hate," Jesus said firmly. "You cannot drive out darkness with more darkness. That has never been my way. And yet you built an empire on division, on fear, on making them the enemy so you could feel righteous." Charlie's chest heaved. Every breath hurt, and not just from the bullet wound. "I didn't mean to. I thought I was helping." "I know," Jesus said, and his voice softened. "That is the tragedy, Charlie. You meant well. So many of my children mean well when they turn my name into a banner for their battles, but good intentions do not excuse the damage done. Silence fell over the room. Charlie could hear his own breathing, ragged and uneven, could hear the steady beep of the heart monitor, could feel the weight of truth pressing down on him like gravity. "What do I do?" he finally whispered. "How do I fix this?" Jesus stood, and the light around him seemed to intensify. "You tell them the truth. You tell them what you have learned, that America's true battle is not in Congress or in courtrooms or in comment sections. It is in the human heart." He moved toward the window, looking out at the city lights beyond. "This nation was blessed because people trusted in me. Families prayed together. Communities gathered in faith. Leaders looked higher than themselves for wisdom. But when a nation forgets, when pride takes the place of prayer, it begins to lose its strength." Charlie pushed himself up in the bed, ignoring the pain that shot through his chest. "Tell me what to do, please. I'll do anything." Jesus turned back to him. "A nation is not destroyed from the outside first, Charlie. It is weakened from within. But if my people return, if they humble themselves and call on my name, I will restore, I will heal, I will raise it again." "How?" Charlie's voice was desperate. "How do I help that happen?" "By changing yourself first," Jesus said simply. "By admitting your mistakes, by choosing love over being right, by showing them that transformation is possible, even for someone like you." Charlie felt something shift inside him, not just emotionally, but physically, like something that had been misaligned for years was finally clicking into place. "The young man who shot you," Jesus said, and Charlie's breath caught. "Tyler Robinson. Do you hate him?" The question hung in the air. Charlie's mind flashed to that moment on the stage, the confusion, the pain, the terror in the eyes of the people in the crowd. He thought about his mother's sobs when she first saw him in the hospital, his father's rage at the TV news coverage. Did he hate Tyler Robinson? Charlie started, then stopped. "I should hate him. He tried to kill me." "That is not what I asked," Jesus said. Charlie closed his eyes, and in the darkness behind his eyelids he saw Tyler's face. Not from the news footage or the mugshot that had been plastered everywhere, but clearer somehow. A kid, barely 23, confused, angry, broken, not so different from the thousands of young people Charlie had spoken to over the years, the ones who felt lost, the ones looking for answers, the ones desperate for someone to tell them they mattered. "No," Charlie said softly, opening his eyes. "I don't hate him." Jesus smiled. It was small, but it transformed his entire face. "Then there is hope for you yet." He moved back toward the bed, and Charlie felt like he was seeing him clearly for the first time, not as a concept, not as a theological figure, but as a person, someone real, someone who loved him despite everything. "Charlie," Jesus said, "you have been given a second chance. Not everyone gets one. Use it wisely." "What do I say?" Charlie asked. "My followers, they expect certain things from me. If I change now, they'll think I'm weak. They'll think I gave up." "Then let them think that," Jesus said. "Better to be weak in their eyes and strong in mine than the reverse. Besides," he smiled again, "some of them have been waiting for you to say something true for a long time. They will hear you." Charlie thought about his audience, the college students, the young professionals, the parents worried about their kids' future. Were they really just looking for political red meat? Or were they, like him, searching for something deeper, something real? "America is standing at a crossroads," Jesus said, his voice taking on a weight that made the air feel heavy. "One road leads to pride, division, and collapse. The other leads to humility, unity, and renewal. The choice is not in the hands of politicians alone. It is in the hands of the people. Charlie saw it, then. Not with his physical eyes, but with something deeper. A vision that Jesus was somehow sharing with him. America stretched out like a map, but instead of states and cities, he saw people. Millions of them, farmers and teachers and soldiers and nurses and parents and children, all of them waiting, all of them hoping, all of them desperate for something to believe in. "If they call on me," Jesus said, "I will answer. If they seek me, I will be found. If they repent, I will heal their land. But if they continue to forget, they will lose the very blessing that made them strong." The vision faded, and Charlie was back in the hospital room. But something had changed. He had changed. The questions that had driven him for years, the anger that had fueled his content, the certainty that had made him so effective, all of it looked different now. Smaller, less important, like mistaking the map for the territory. "You must speak," Jesus said. "Tell them what you have seen. Tell them what you have heard. For my message is not for you alone, but for America." "They won't believe me," Charlie said. "They'll say I hit my head, that the trauma made me hallucinate, that I'm—" "Some will," Jesus agreed, "but not all. And even if only one heart turns because of your words, isn't that worth it?" Charlie thought about Tyler Robinson sitting in a cell right now, probably thinking his life was over, probably convinced that violence was the only answer because that's what the world had taught him. What if Tyler heard this? What if Tyler knew that Charlie didn't hate him? That Charlie understood, somehow, that they were both victims of the same disease? The disease of certainty, of righteousness, of choosing being right over being loving. "Yes," Charlie whispered. "It's worth it." Jesus reached out and placed a hand on Charlie's head. The touch was warm, gentle, and in that moment Charlie felt every mistake he'd ever made, every harsh word, every divisive tweet, every moment of pride over humility, all of it acknowledged and somehow, impossibly, forgiven. "Then go," Jesus said, "and remember, Charlie, my kingdom is not of this world, but it can be reflected in this world through people who choose to love instead of hate. Choose mercy instead of judgment. Choose unity instead of division." The light began to fade. Charlie wanted to grab onto it, to ask more questions, to stay in this moment forever where everything made sense. But the light was already dissolving, returning to wherever it had come from. And then he was alone again. Just Charlie Kirk in a hospital bed, surrounded by beeping machines and the smell of antiseptic and the weight of a truth he couldn't unknow. He sat there in the darkness for a long time, tears still streaming down his face. His phone was on the bedside table. 53 unread messages. People wanting statements, wanting to know when he'd return, wanting to capitalize on his survival for political gain. But Charlie didn't reach. For the phone, not yet. Instead, he closed his eyes, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he prayed. Not a quick prayer before a speech, not a strategic prayer for success. A real prayer. Honest and broken and desperate. "Help me," he whispered. "Help me be better than I was. Help me use this second chance for something that actually matters. Help me point people to you instead of to myself." Silence answered him. But it wasn't empty silence. It was the silence of being heard. When his mother returned with coffee 20 minutes later, she found Charlie sitting up in bed, eyes red from crying, but with an expression on his face she hadn't seen in years. Peace. "Honey, are you okay?" She rushed to his side. "Do I need to call the nurse?" Charlie shook his head. "Mom, I need to tell you something, and then I need to tell everyone. But you first." She sat down, concern etched in every line of her face. "What is it?" Charlie took a deep breath. "Something happened tonight. Something I can't fully explain. But I think everything's about to change." His mother searched his face, and something in her expression softened. She reached out and took his hand. "Tell me," she said simply. So he did. He told her about the light, about Jesus, about the message, about America and its purpose and the choice that lay before all of them. And when he finished, his mother was crying too. But she was smiling. "I've been praying for this," she whispered. "For years, I've been praying you'd remember what faith really means." "I remember now," Charlie said, "and I need to make sure everyone else remembers too." 3 days later, Charlie Kirk was released from the hospital. The media was camped outside, cameras ready, microphones extended. Everyone expected the firebrand to return, expected him to turn his near-death into political ammunition, expected business as usual. But when Charlie stepped up to the microphones, leaning slightly on a cane, he didn't give them what they expected. "I want to thank everyone for their prayers," he started, his voice still weak but clear. "I want to thank the medical staff who saved my life. And I want to talk to you about something that happened while I was recovering. Something that changed everything." He paused, gathering strength. "I had a visitor. And before you dismiss what I'm about to say, I need you to understand that I'm completely serious. Jesus Christ appeared to me in that hospital room. And he told me something about America that I need to share with all of you." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters shouted questions. But Charlie raised his hand for silence. "He told me that this country has lost its way. Not because of Democrats or Republicans, not because of any political party or ideology, but because we've forgotten what actually sustains a nation. Faith, love, humility, unity." He looked directly into the cameras. "For years I've been part of the problem. I've made enemies out of neighbors. I've chosen winning arguments over winning hearts. I've used faith as a weapon instead of as a bridge. And I was wrong. I am deeply, truly sorry." The silence now was absolute. No one had expected this. "Jesus showed me that America's real battle isn't in Washington, D.C. It's in the human heart. And that battle can't be won with political victories or culture war triumphs. It can only be won when we choose love over hate, when we choose mercy over judgment, when we choose unity over division." He paused, emotions thick in his throat. "I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if people will accept this change or reject it. But I know that I can't go back to who I was. I've seen something too real, too true to ignore." Charlie looked directly at one camera, as if he could see through it to every person who would watch this moment. "So, I'm asking all of you, everyone who has ever listened to me, everyone who has ever supported me, to consider this. What if we're all wrong about what matters? What if the real fight isn't against each other, but for each other? What if America's greatest strength isn't in defeating enemies, but in refusing to create them in the first place?" "And to Tyler Robinson," Charlie's voice broke slightly. "The young man who tried to kill me, I forgive you, completely. I understand now that you're not my enemy. You're a symptom of a disease we all share, the disease of believing violence and hatred can solve what only love can heal. I pray for you, and I hope someday we can talk." He stepped back from the microphones, exhausted. His mother appeared at his side, supporting him as reporters shouted questions he didn't answer. As they walked toward the waiting car, Charlie looked up at the sky. Clouds were breaking apart, letting beams of sunlight through, and he thought he heard, just for a moment, a voice that resonated in his chest. "Well done, my son. Now the real work begins." The video of Charlie Kirk's statement went viral within hours. 15 million views in the first day, 50 million by the end of the week. Political commentators on both sides didn't know what to make of it. Some called it genuine. Some called it a publicity stunt. Some called it a mental breakdown. But in living rooms across America, in college dorms and coffee shops and dinner tables, people watched. And some of them, more than anyone expected, began to ask themselves the same question Charlie had asked in that hospital room. What will happen to America? And more importantly, what role will I play in the answer? Tyler Robinson watched the statement from his cell. He watched it 17 times in a row, tears streaming down his face, until a guard finally told him to stop. That night, Tyler wrote a letter to Charlie Kirk. It began simply, "Thank you for showing me that transformation is possible, even for someone like me." 6 months later, Turning Point USA held its annual conference. But the tone was different. The speakers were different. The message was different. Charlie Kirk stood on stage, healthy now, stronger than before. And he spoke not about enemies or battles or cultural victories. He spoke about love, about mercy, about the radical idea that maybe, just maybe, America's greatest strength had always been its capacity for redemption. We can choose to be bitter, he said, or we can choose to be better. We can choose to see each other as enemies, or we can choose to see each other as fellow travelers on a journey back to what matters, back to faith, back to hope, back to love. The crowd was different too. Democrats and Republicans, liberals and conservatives, people who'd never agreed on anything sitting side by side, listening to a message that transcended politics. It wasn't perfect. Change never is. Many of Charlie's old followers left. Many criticized him for going soft or losing his way. But others, thousands of others, found something they'd been searching for all along. Hope, real hope. Not hope in a political victory or a culture war triumph, but hope in something deeper, something eternal. Hope that America could still be what it was meant to be, a light, not because of its power or wealth, but because of its heart. Years later, when people asked Charlie Kirk about that night in the hospital, he would always pause before answering. Some experiences are too holy for casual conversation, too sacred to reduce to sound bites. But he would say this, "I died that night in Utah, not physically, though I came close. But the person I was died, and the person I became was someone I should have been all along, someone who understands that Jesus didn't come to start a political movement. He came to start a revolution of the heart. And if America is going to survive, if it's going to be worth saving, that's the only revolution that matters." He would smile then, a peace in his eyes that hadn't been there before that night. "I saw him, I heard him, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that moment, trying to point people not to myself, not to a party, not to an ideology, but to him. Because that's what America needs. That's what we all need. Not another political warrior, just people who remember what love looks like when it's real." And somewhere in that space between heaven and earth, maybe Jesus smiled. Not because everything was fixed, not because America had suddenly become perfect, but because one heart had turned, one voice had changed, one person had chosen love over hate. And that, after all, is how every revolution begins. Not with armies or elections or political victories, but with a single heart, transformed, choosing to love even when it costs everything, especially then. "If my people, who are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, and I will forgive their sin and will heal their land.